TV is getting reinvented. Some months recently, we've seen that CTV, or whatever you want to call it, streaming, OTT, smart TV, IPTV, VOD, video on demand, hybrid TV, SVOD, subscription video on demand, AVOD, ad supported video on demand, FAST, free ad supported streaming TV, TVE, TV everywhere. That's a new one to me. Live streaming, cord cutting, everywhere we see that is changing everything. And we see that some months, hey, that's more than half of all the viewing. This is US numbers that you're looking at right now. Some months it's a little less, some months broadcast still wins, but the trend is very clear. Okay, if we can move to the next slide. The names, yeah, they're changing, right? There's a mix of new and old here. Some of the new are at or near the top of the heap. A lot of the old are still up there as well, doing very, very well. And they're, of course, very quickly growing into hybrid media corporations with tentacles all over the place, massive streaming components, and still hanging on to some of the old pieces as well. But it is still incredibly early days. Almost all the ad revenue is still being made by the empire. And the rebels, they control half the media galaxy, but they're only taking in about 15%. That means that the big old boys, next slide if we can, are still the big new boys of revenue. And of course, they're fighting, scheming, building to hold on to that revenue. So there's going to be a ton of change, innovation, acquisition, mergers in this space still to come. Question is, how are you going to take advantage of this exploding ecosystem and use it to effectively grow your companies? Doing so probably means learning a few new tricks, might not be in the old app growth playbook, and it probably means mastering connected TV ad strategies. To get you started, we've assembled a bunch of all-stars to talk and walk us through advertising on CTV. And I was a little bit naughty here. I wanted to introduce the companies that they're from. And so I went to LinkedIn, went to their About page, and grabbed the first sentence. So, hey, this is what it says. First one is Alexander Pham. He's EVP Enterprise for EMEA and APAC at Vibe. Vibe, so their LinkedIn page says, is the Google Ads of TV. We allow any marketer, any brand of any size to advertise on TV within 5 minutes. That's quite a promise. Wow. We also have Jake Richardson. He's the head of CTV strategy and partnerships at Moloko. And I cheated on Moloko. They had a long mission statement on their LinkedIn page. So I went to their website and grabbed a phrase from there. Moloko is machine learning powered performance advertising solutions. Super pumped to have Ashley Parducci, who's the VP of Customer Insights and Measurement at TV Scientific. And their LinkedIn page says TV Scientific is the first and only CTV advertising platform purpose-built for serious performance marketers. Last but not least, we have Evyatar Ram, VP Product at Singular. And yeah, this is from the Singular About page. Singular empowers marketers to future-proof their growth with next-gen attribution analytics. My name is John Kutsier. I consult with Singular and I write as a contributor for Forbes, and I will be your MC today. So in the first third of the webinar, we're going to set the parameters, what CTV is good for, how it works, how it differs from traditional mobile app marketing. In the second, we'll get practical, talk about partners, performance, bidding, creative, and in the final third, we'll talk about measurement, the vital question of how to measure ad performance on CTV. Just a note, this is recorded. If there's something you want to see, you'll get a chance to see it again. You'll actually get it in your email tomorrow morning. You'll get a copy to rewatch. We will take questions at the end as well. We'll have time for that. So use the Q&A functionality at the bottom of your screen. Okay, let's set the stage with 3 questions so our panelists know who they're talking to and how to tailor their answers. We'll bring up poll number 1 right now if we can. Poll number 1, are you currently running CTV campaigns? Yes, not yet, but planning to. No, and no plans to. Not sure why I'm in this webinar because I have no plans. I guess I just want to know. Are you currently running CTV ad campaigns? If you can make your selection now, that would be great. Okay, when we're ready, we'll take poll number 1 off and we'll go to poll number 2. Poll number 2. This is the answers first. Yes, 42%, 51% planning to. No plans, but they're checking it out. Okay, hey, you're in the right place. That is excellent. Okay, poll number 2. Poll number 2 is, hey, it's a great one for those who said yes or not yet. It's what's your biggest obstacle to running CTV campaigns? So if we can get poll number 2 up, that would be great. It's possible we're having technical issues. I don't really know. But let's see. You know what? If we can't get poll number 2 up, what I'm going to do is, Evitar, I'm going to ask you to introduce our host, Singular, before we dive into the rest of... poll number 2 is up. What's your single biggest obstacle? Is it measurement? Is it finding the right partners? Is it creative? Is it just understanding enough about the space? Okay, make your selection. Biggest obstacle. Measurement is always challenging, no matter where you go. Right partners always matter, and creative, always hard. So this is a tough one. You got to pick one. You can't pick all of the above, which frankly I would pick probably. Okay, let's make your selection there, and then we can bring poll number 2 off the screen. And we will bring up poll number 3. Based on what you currently know, again, the answers, my apologies. Measurement, biggest challenge. Wow. Okay. And second, understanding enough about the space. There we go. There we go. Great. And partners and creative are always challenging. Poll number 3 is going to be interesting as well. Okay, based on what you currently know, you may not know everything, but based on what you currently know, will CTV ads, will they drive app installs that are cheaper, same, or more expensive than in-app ads? Okay, will they drive app installs that are cheaper, same, or more expensive? And of course, there's lots of complexities there. We're going to talk about that, where they fit in the customer journey, and if they have to be measured with incrementality, and if they're more assists and all that stuff. But here you can only just make the selections from what you've got. Okay, let's bring up those results. Okay, more expensive is the majority consensus. Well, let's see what our experts have to say and if they give us some insight on that. Excellent. Evitar, now you're up. Before we dive into all the webinar content, please introduce our host, Singular. Who is Singular?
Sure. Thanks, John. So Singular is a company that we have a couple of different components. We are an MMP. We have a cost aggregation solution. We have a couple of other components as well. But really, I would say what we are trying to do, what our mission is try to sort of centralize all of your marketing data in one place and then remove as much of the complexity as we can. We all know that the ecosystem is becoming more and more complex. CTV is a huge opportunity, great opportunity, but adds complexity to the measurement, as we just saw in the poll. And what we try to do is remove as much of that complexity as we can and allow you to measure any marketing activity that you want as accurately as we can and enable you to make good decisions, essentially. So that's who we are.
Wonderful. Great. I think you just said it's a big easy button. I hope that's true. Excellent. Alex, we're going to start with you. We're going to do kind of an introduction to CTV and the big picture here. We just saw the poll results. We saw a lot of people saying, hey, it's probably more expensive. Hey, I'm here to learn a lot about it. Answer a broad question. Alex, we'll start with you. Why should mobile app marketers care about CTV, and how should it fit into their overall marketing strategy?
Sure. Thanks for having us, John. So we've seen in the past few years, I'd say since maybe a bit more than 3 years, CTV becoming a quite interesting growth channel for performance marketers. So you might have, as in your marketing journey, maxed out your Meta campaigns, Google campaigns. Maybe you've also investigated video networks and DSPs. Well, the same thing is happening now with a new channel, the growth of CTV, as you showed as well. A lot of new platforms are coming into place. That Disney, Netflix, and more streaming platforms are also making their inventory available. And so the same shift we've seen with programmatic advertising is also coming to CTV. So you have similar technologies, everything based on real-time bidding, for example, and the capabilities and the targeting options that are much more precise than traditional TV advertising. So all in all, I'd say why is it important to care about it is mainly because of the scale, the targeting capabilities. Of course, it comes with challenges that we're going to talk about in a bit.
Ashley, same question.
Sure. So CTV is absolutely an incremental channel. We've found that with even the most saturated of apps. So really excited to see what the reach is beyond search and social that our app marketers are traditionally doing today. On top of that, it can now be bought on a performance basis. So historically, it's CTV, TV, reach and frequency play. There are platforms like TV Scientific now that actually allow you to buy on the outcome, on that result itself, and truly make it a digital channel, bringing it outside of that brand budget. So that's certainly why we see it being an important channel.
Incrementality is huge, right? And if you're already saturated on SDK networks or whatever, or Meta or Google, I mean, that's absolutely huge. Jake, anything to add there?
Not to this question, although I will get to this question. I just want to add that was the most impressive run through of acronyms I've seen in this space. And there are a lot, and there are a lot of times I've seen someone try and do that. So that was pretty incredible.
I may or may not have had some help from ChatGPT. So
this is the way of the world. The only thing I would add to what both Ashley and Alexander said is that it is an arbitrage opportunity for performance marketers. Like both Ashley and Alexander said, before we had, before we saturated Meta and Google, and now we've worked our way into this channel TV, much like in programmatic, where initially it was kind of a brand channel where you would just put money there and see if you could get reach and frequency or some of these traditional, non-traditional performance metrics. So there's a ton of brand advertisers in this space and very few performance marketers in this space. If you're first, you will get gains as a result of learning how your strategy sort of points you towards the next 5 years, while everyone else is still trying to figure out how to make CTV performance work. And I think the good news is it's not too late, because we're still in the early innings of this performance CTV. But I think all the more reason to get started. And you can get started small. You don't need to get started big, which we'll talk more about later.
Love it, love it, love it. Evitar, anything to add on this first question?
Sure, just a bit of context how we see it from sort of the singular side, the MMP side. So we ask our customers like every year, what are the main things that you're looking into? What are the things that you're focusing on the next 12 months and questions like that. And one of the main pillars that we've seen consistently over the last couple of years is what we call sort of diversification of UA activity. So if in the past, sort of a UA manager was very focused on a couple of sort of major networks and maybe a couple of other small ones, but it was all very kind of structured and kind of similar in many cases. In the last few years, for a variety of reasons, everyone is expanding their reach. Everyone is trying to find new types of channels, whether it's CTV and there's podcasts and influencers, and everything's becoming a lot more complex, and there's huge opportunities out there, and it's a huge pillar that everyone's trying to expand and kind of find sort of those incremental audiences. So that's how we see it.
It's really a good point, and it brings to mind when I did the ROI index for Singular earlier in this year. The ROI index looks at all the ad networks kind of on the planet and platforms as well. Among the rising stars, 3 or 4 were CTV networks, CTV platforms. That was interesting. They didn't make it into the actual index in all cases, but they were obviously something that people were looking at hard. And as we'll get into as well later on this, it's a fundamentally different experience than an ad on your phone, on the little device in your hand. So that's going to be cool to talk about. Alex, actually, Ashley, I'm going to start with you. When somebody's looking at doing CTV, what are some of the common pitfalls or challenges?
The most common pitfall that I see is taking the traditional digital strategy that's worked in another channel that has a trackable click, it has a trackable impression. It is also highly targeted on a user level, and replicating that in CTV. We definitely encourage a test and learn mindset as you come over to CTV. Targeting happens at the household level and not the individual level. So if you're not out there exploring what inventory works for you, what genres work for you, what audiences work for you in CTV, you are, I believe, at a disadvantage when it comes to performance. Also holding, on that same vein, holding CTV to those same KPIs that you have in traditional digital. I see a lot of have to have the lowest cost per install. Well, you need data to get there. So make sure that you're giving yourself the runway to understand what's working and what doesn't work. And along with that, what is the goal? Is it simply the lowest install, best ROAS at the lowest install, in which you're probably working with other channels and using the halo effect of TV? Or is it that I am looking for incremental reach and incremental installs, and that comes at a higher cost given the media has to work harder. It's introducing the user to the brand. So getting clear on those goals and not having conflicting goals is something I see a lot as well.
Cool. And the measurement stuff, I mean, we're going to spend 3-4 questions on that at least in the last third of the webinar. Looking forward to that. Jake, to you, common pitfalls or challenges when starting CTV advertising?
Yeah, it's exactly what Ashley mentioned. We run into the exact same thing, which is that you have someone who was born and raised on UA marketing and then comes to us and says, hey, I've heard about this new channel CTV. And immediately they're holding the same exact framework, the same exact lens up to that channel and trying to make it penciled the same way so that they're not getting the D7 ROAS that they're used to getting in mobile UA. Well, then all of a sudden CTV isn't an efficient channel for them. And that's understandable, right? Like, we are all running businesses here and they need to back out. But I think what Ashley highlighted that I think is really important is this halo effect. There's an important halo effect here where if you run CTV, you can run this as an experiment. If you run CTV with a holdout group of your existing mobile UA advertisee like customer base, and you run it and you don't run it for another group, you can actually see, hey, our CTV investment made those mobile installs cheaper down funnel. And that's exactly the goal that we want to accomplish with CTV, is zooming out and getting the entire funnel as a picture that we can drive performance at each level of that funnel, rather than let's just push CTV to the bottom of the funnel. I think when we get started in CTV, a lot of our clients want to push CTV to the bottom of the funnel and then see how they can make it work. And we sort of advocate, oh, that's fine. You will get good UA results from it as well, but working your way up as well. Otherwise, you're going to have the same problem that you have with mobile UA, which is that you will have scraped every single incremental install you can get from a DR basis, and you won't have spent any time on the top of the funnel.
Absolutely. And the types of users you get are fundamentally different from those two approaches as well, which is also interesting.
Exactly.
Okay. Alex, we're going to turn to you. CTV is different. It's a big screen in many cases, not all cases. It's a longer time frame of attention that people are spending than they might be spending here. Does it work best for specific verticals or types of apps?
We've seen quite a large panel of clients right now, advertisers who've been experimenting with CTV. Obviously, if we look at the mobile space, the early adopters have often been gaming companies. So gaming companies have tested, have experimented from the early days of CTV, finding the incremental reach and audiences, and also finding the challenges in measurement, of course. I think what works for CTV is also anything related to, in the gaming space, it's going to be IP heavy titles. On the subscription apps as well, fintech, everything with sort of like a subscription event or anything that the app would be monetizing from would be interesting to measure, and can be measured with an NMP and could be traced back to a CTV ad. So it's important to have your KPIs in mind. Anything that could be measured with direct response will be can perform on CTV if optimized properly, if you understand, of course, your strategies fitting with the channels, fitting with the creative. All of these three dimensions would be important to make sure that you optimize towards the ROAS that you expect for the apps you're monetizing.
Jake, same question.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the biggest boost that we've seen, we are predominantly a gaming company. We have a lot of gaming clients, but then we also have a lot of consumer app clients and e-commerce clients. We've seen success across all of them, but I think one of the distinctions that's important to bear in mind, and this is more on the consumer side and less on the landscape side, where I think a lot of the customers or a lot of people in this webinar want to talk more about the publisher side and how to make sense of that. But I think it's an important distinction. At a lot of companies that have moved up funnel a little bit, there is a performance vertical and a brand vertical. And so what we've seen, if anyone on this call works at one of those types of companies where you sit over a growth budget and someone else sits over the brand budget, they start to get conflated as you work into these digital channels. TV, when it was linear TV, very much a brand channel. However, now that it's measurable and on that one-to-one basis, it can start to act like a performance channel. And so the next 5 years are going to be very, very interesting to see. And I think the same thing happened in the programmatic space, where once you could only buy anything digital through, a few different platforms on a direct basis. And then once it became programmatically available, the programmatic leads at the agencies and at the brands started to get a larger and larger sort of charter. I think that's going to happen in the performance space. And so if you're one of those folks that works at a company where, hey, I don't get to touch brand, I don't talk about CTV, that's actually not true. I'd like to dispel that notion. You have the opportunity to start making investments in a channel that can perform, and then start to take those to your executive team and say, look, we drove meaningful, measurable results in a channel that was traditionally brand. Why don't we shift the way we're thinking about this channel? So we have seen success with gaming, who is traditionally a very low funnel DR based client, but we've also seen a lot of success in the middle and the top of the funnel for clients that traditionally viewed TV as, look, we're just trying to get reach and frequency. Oh, wow, you can drive installs on TV, not just measure them, but drive them. Let's double click into that. And so if you work at one of those companies, I think it's a great opportunity to start thinking that way.
Love it, love it, love it. Ashley, I want to turn to you. We've heard a bunch of things. Hey, it's different. Don't approach CTV advertising the way you've done traditional mobile app install advertising. And I can't believe I'm saying traditional mobile app install, but hey, it's old school. It's a decade old. Ashley, how does CTV differ? Talk about ad load, completion rate, timelines, targeting, audiences, all that stuff.
Sure. So I touched a little bit on some of this in an earlier answer, but when we think about ad load, CTV is typically 95% and above completion rate of the video. So when you're working with a partner, make sure that what you're buying is CTV. If you're buying CTV and you're seeing lower completion rates, is that OLV mixed in there with CTV? So when I'm talking about this, pure CTV, non-skippable, premium content. On top of that, the creative piece, super important. We also want, with audiences, I touched a little bit on it being a household targeted versus an individual targeted. So definitely think through that. I can have conflicting individuals in a single household. And if I'm only going for my household earner under 100K, but I've got both of them living in the same household, I'm actually missing out on my target audience. And I think as people transition to CTV, they can have a hard time wrapping their heads around the audience piece. So certainly work with your provider to understand what audiences might make the most sense for you. Work through A/B testing on broad inventory versus audience targeted. Try genres from the supply partners.
Jake, the ad load is also very different as well, right? I mean, what do you got? 4 ad breaks in an hour in some cases and sometimes less?
Yeah, it changed a lot when we moved from linear to digital because people were used to, well, actually it's changed a lot. It changed a lot because people wanted subscription video on demand, right? And so they would buy video and then they would not see any commercials. And then there was also some of this sort of free video that was being pushed out there to try and get consumers hooked on streaming. And so streaming is competing with linear TV for consumer attention. And as a result, yes, John, to your point, there is a lower ad load in digital. However, that is changing as well. If you look at FAST, free ad-supported streaming television, that's sort of intended to mimic what linear was, which is always on TV. Hey, you turn your TV on, you just leave it on as a living wallpaper, and you get to see ads while you're, making coffee or doing the dishes or whatever it happens to be in your day-to-day life. So we see that the ad load is starting to rise. And also I think there's this wariness. In the mobile community, it's not as bad, but in the TV community, there is this wariness to run too many ads. And I think we should disabuse ourselves of that notion. If we're trying to drive performance, whether I saw the ad one time or I saw it 900 times, if I bought the Honda car, that's a really, really good expenditure. So started as a small advertising pool, and it's grown a lot. Great question, John.
Love it. Okay, we're going to transition to actually making CTV work. And at the end, we'll also be talking about measurement and how that works. Jake, we're going to stick with you. What publishers, networks, partners are amazing, have great ROI, are the easiest to work with? What insights can you give?
Yeah, this is a loaded question. And as you can see in my
addresses, phone numbers.
Yeah, I'm not doxing anyone here. No, I think without naming any names, because I have to work with every publisher on a day-to-day basis, but I think what we've seen is that it doesn't really follow what people think about when they think about connected TV. Just because you don't spend a ton of time watching what you think is Samsung TV, first of all, you might watch more Samsung TV than you think if you have a Samsung television. And second of all, someone is watching a lot of that. So there are some of these newer partners. You saw those slides that John showed at the outset. There's some of these partners that didn't exist in this space 10 years ago because it was really just old linear cable networks that now have created a digital footprint. And some of those that come to mind, Tubi, Samsung, Hulu, Pluto, Vizio, LG, the OEMs, people that Roku that own some share of user attention. There's actually been a ton of scale and a ton of value in those places. Even if you personally don't think about that when you think about TV, if you think about Sunday Night Football or you think about watching, a Sunday night movie on TV, there are a lot of people that are streaming that content and are driving real results on it. So I think zooming out a little bit and thinking about connected TV is a little different from our previous conception of TV. It's not just the most popular thing on TV, it's whatever's running on TV.
Absolutely. And you mentioned football, and there's some networks, I forget which one. I mean, I think Amazon is streaming some NFL games, and then Peacock had a big game, and it was only available there. And it was like, well, everybody had to get Peacock, and I was traveling at the time. Everybody was downloading the app and all this stuff, right? I mean, it's a pretty crazy world to be in.
It was a successful push, and it worked. It actually worked. Like, they drove a ton of subscriptions with that.
We'll see what that translates to over time, but they have been very successful. Ashley, how do you pick the right partners?
I will echo everything that Jake said. TV Scientific is certainly a performance-first company. So as you run across a breadth of partners, really you're following those signals to understand what works best for you, for your brand. And it may not, to Jake's point, it may not be who you thought it was. I get customers that are targeting lower income, and they think that, no, I won't find my customer on a paid streaming service. But when you start to think about the economics of streaming, well, I get 3 streaming services bundled with my cell phone plan. Instacart is including Peacock, for example. There's so much at play in the ecosystem. They may not be buying that. Seasonality also plays a factor. So I love the example of the holidays. Holiday movies start to pop up. There are streaming services very focused on holiday that are, for example, running all of the Hallmark movies on Friendly TV. A bunch of us may not have heard of Friendly, but you have consumers going there. See? So definitely seasonality as well, but follow performance.
Yeah, super interesting. Alex, we're going to go to you next. And by the way, if you didn't see while Ashley was talking about, does everybody know Friendly? And she said, many of us don't know. And I raised my hand. I think you only see one of us at a time. But yeah, I had never heard of that. And there you go. It exists. Alex, we're going to talk to you now. We've mentioned brand and performance, and Jake has talked about sometimes there are different budgets, even set up on different sides of the house. What can you expect from CTV, and is it just different based on your app and your vertical? Should we think about brand and performance in CTV?
Well, in the case of CTV campaigns, we often think, it's at the really intersection of branding and performance. We also need to think that, if your end goal, for example, you're a gaming company, your end goal is to drive app downloads, you're also promoting your brand at the same time. So even if you have, let's say, website activity, or you have games on PC or anything like that, you're also going to have downstream events that are going on other channels. It's just depending on what you want to measure at this exact point. So CTV campaigns at the end of the day can drive direct response. We have MMPs to help us do that with the number of installs that we drive, the number of assisted installs also that we are getting. We talked briefly about also the halo effect of CTV, but it's important to look at the before and after you run CTV campaign. Did it have an impact on your social campaigns results? Did it have an impact on your search result? Because obviously with the friction that is CTV ad experience, the users will have to go and search for your brand, search for the name of your app or anything like that, your service down the line. So there might be some results that will be misattributed, let's say, to another channel. So it's important also to look at the bigger picture, how CTV is impacting your marketing mix, and make sure that this is something that you keep in mind, that it's also about brand recall, brand recognition. When we grew up, we watched TV, we remember the brands that were recurring on TV, and they stuck into our minds because they were also having this frequency on TV. So I think that's a similar strategy we need to apply with connected TV. We have frequency capping, that's a good thing, but we can also experiment on what works better between the brand recall, between driving direct response, and overall what's best for your brand and how this impact the users again.
Alexander, great answer. And I think that's really, really critical. One of the things you mentioned is looking at KPIs in places maybe you wouldn't have looked at before. So let's say you're running a CTV campaign. Are you aware of your search volume on Apple search ads or on the App Store, right? Are you aware of what's happening there? Are you aware of your search volume on Google Play, right? If you have an Apple search ads account, you can see a lot of that data, and actually Singular can pull a lot of that data in as well, right? And are you aware of what's happening on your website, that traffic? Are you seeing a spike when your CTV campaign comes out, right? So there's things to measure here that you need a bigger lens for. Jake, anything to add there on the brand performance question?
I think I've beaten this sort of question to a pulp at this point, but I really do agree.
No worries.
That everyone has said. No, but I do agree. Like it can't. If you zoom in and you treat it one way, you're only going to get outcomes for that sort of. So if you zoom in and you treat it like it's a performance channel, you're only going to be looking at it from a performance lens. You're not going to be able to zoom out and see the places where you're grabbing incremental efficiency. You're grabbing more than you would have otherwise seen. Because it is a new channel and it is a new part of your marketing mix. In the same way that mobile UA sort of augmented search, like mobile app search, right? The same thing has to be thought about for CTV.
Yeah, exactly. Ashley, how should you approach bidding in CTV?
To start with, great question. To start with, we certainly want to go for the best cost for the media. We like to bid at the floor, find somebody very transparent on CPMs. Now, as you start to grow your campaign, you may have to bid higher for the media that you know performs. So using machine learning to understand where to bid is typically very important. All publishers come at different CPMs, and you are going to have to lean on the technology of the platform that you're working with to implement the best bidding strategy.
And one thing I would add to that, John, that you're on mute. One thing I would add to what Ashley said, that's exactly right. And it actually dovetails with the last question, which is marketers come to CTV as a new channel and they treat it like the old channel. But then they also come to CTV and they kind of cake and eat it too. They say, but I do want to pick all the channels I run on and I want to run it this way. And to Ashley's point, Moloco and Vibe and TV Scientific all employ some level of machine learning, try and pick those publishers for you to drive performance. You can't run on Sunday Night Football at $38 CPMs running against all of the major car companies and hope that you're going to drive a $2 CPA. You just can't. Like, whether or not you can drive a $2 CPA on NBC's content is a different question, but Sunday Night Football is the most expensive thing in the world. So you have to get rid of those. That your bidding strategy has to adjust to your KPIs and be realistic. If you come to TV because you want to be premium and have a Super Bowl ad, that's not going to pencil for your $2 CPAs. So just make sure that the partner you're using leverages some form of bidding algorithm that gets toward what you're trying to drive. And also for you as a marketer, zoom out a little bit. Don't hold the standard of, hey, if it's running on CTV, I expect to see it when I watch Netflix next. Like, you're not going to get that and get the really, really low CPAs that you want. You can do that if you raise your CPA level up. We would all love you to raise your CPA level up, but that's not what you want as a marketer. So just make sure that you don't you don't want to try and have your cake and eat it too, which is a weird phrase I've always thought, because if you had the cake, you should be able to eat it, but I don't know.
Yes, but if you eat it, then you don't have it anymore. That's the point. But I like to have the cake and eat it too, so that's I buy 2 pieces. No, I'm just joking. Good point. Very good point. I see some great chatter in the webinar chat, and that's awesome. Lidvina, I see you've got a great question. Let's ask that in the end. We've got some time. We're reserving some time. I love that. It's a great question. If you can add it in the Q&A, that'd be great. If not, we'll pick it up from there. But that's a great question. We'll ask that at the end as well. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about creative. Ashley, you're up. Talk about creative for CTV. What works? How do you test? How do you optimize?
Creative can be one of the biggest hurdles, and I think fairly intimidating for companies that are new to CTV. I've seen everything work. I've seen UGC converted to CTV creative work. Typically, you can work with your partner to make that happen really quickly. I've seen highly produced creative work, and I'm even starting to see some, I know we don't love the word, but some AI creative work. So it just depends. What you should do is start testing. If I had my perfect, this is what creative looks like, you absolutely have a call to action. That's easy to add, even if that UGC doesn't have a call to action. Make sure that the consumer knows what the brand is. Sight, sound, and motion, so important. You think about the audio piece, test out different voices if possible, the female voice versus the male voice versus the accent, that all may work differently. When we're talking about gaming, we certainly love to show a human with gameplay with that device in hand so that it's clear to the consumer that this is in fact an app. It is for the mobile phone. So those are some of the highlights in terms of what we see works.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to ask Alex and Jake and Ashley. We're going to start with Alex for a couple of examples of stuff they've seen in CTV around creative, around campaigns that really worked. Some examples of success, some brands or apps or other companies that are winning. And maybe even a couple examples of what's not working. Alex, we'll start with you. What have you seen that you thought, wow, that's working really well. The numbers are awesome.
On the gaming side, I can share some more in there. The most important in the creative, so you have 15-second or 30-second creatives. The most important is to be as upfront as possible, that the user will have to make an action. Download the game, visit the website, something like that. So very important in this time frame to show, as Ashley mentioned, that this is going to be an app. It's available on the stores. Maybe you even have a search bar with the name of the app that they would need to type in. So when the advertisers that we work with have been the most upfront with what they are promoting, and the game, what is the game about, having a mix of live action and gameplay, and people like to see people on TV. So it's the more real element you put also into it, the more people will be closer to your brand. So we really saw in the space of the gaming advertising, live action really performing the best. UGC going close second because it's not necessary to have like a high production for your creatives. You can do them with people are used to how many people are watching TikTok ads with really average ads, average quality. So it's possible to also run this kind of content on TV, but obviously leveraging sound as much as possible and making it throughout the whole video. So that's for the gaming side. For the e-commerce front, it's kind of like in between. You still want to have a bit of a branding effect. You need to sell your brand still. So we've seen some customers also doing more of like testing more of a inspirational kind of creatives and promoting the brand. But then at the end of the day, also at the end of the creative, having some sort of a direct response, visit this website, or perform like a certain action after the creative is played.
Excellent. Jake, any examples you want to share?
Yeah, call to action is super, super important. I think that'll be a repeating theme as we get into more of the measurement section with webinar. And then while we've said, get started, just start small, get started to use creative that you have. I think Alex made a good point. There is some creative, there is a threshold that you do need to exceed. And the creative we see that doesn't work is like really, really loud, really mobile oriented, and just a clip from your gameplay, I think of it more as we're not because in mobile, you know, it's a closed loop. You're there, you click on the ad, you then download the app. That's more like slots, right? That's like playing, like to take a gambling reference. That's slot machine. You're trying to get someone to continue to play your game. And I think of CTV as a little bit more like poker, right? Like it's a longer game. Sometimes you lose even with a great strategy. Sometimes you don't get the customer to connect the dots in the CTV space. But those calls to action are the things that allow them to have more engagement points with your brand. So if they see, hey, here's the app icon like the app download icons. This is an app. I'll go check it. I'll look in the store. Or they see a QR code. They want to engage with it. There are a lot of different ways to get people to engage with your content. But if the goal is to drive an action, you should have a call to action.
Love it, love it, love it. And you mentioned measurement. I think that now's the time to come into the third section that we're going to talk about. And Evitar, we're going to come to you. It's your time. You are on stage. Evitar, talk about measurement in CTV. How accurate is it? How quickly can you get data for optimization? What techniques could you use? All that stuff.
Sure. So I think the challenge with measurement is that on the one hand, I think we all recognize that CTV is different, and this was mentioned many times sort of throughout this webinar, that you have to think of it as something different, and you have to kind of accept that it's somewhat different, and that's part of the appeal because it is different. So that's on the one hand, but on the other hand, advertisers, when they go and they measure their marketing efforts, they're looking oftentimes for two things. They want sort of this consistency, so to be able to measure all their marketing activity using the same ruler. And they also want simplicity. So, some marketers have huge, obviously, data science teams, and they can find the exact impact of this on some other channel, and they can find those sort of very unique dynamics. But many marketers don't. They want it simple. They're like, well, what did it do? And I think that's kind of the challenge. It's on the one hand different, and on the other hand, there's an expectation that the measurement can be similar enough to how I'm measuring everything else. So I think in terms of where the measurement is going, there's really two kind of threads. One is more on incrementality, and we'll talk about that later on. And the other one is to take sort of the classic standard, let's call it sort of last click attribution framework that sort of the industry is kind of used to, and almost adapting it to CTV. So in the singular front, some of the things that we've done is because we recognize that CTV is different, we can change some things in the attribution waterfall, in the time windows, in the importance of an impression versus a click. We can make those changes to sort of better, to be more relevant to CTV. So at the end of the day, the customer can have that notion of consistency, and I'm doing last click attribution, but we adapt it to the different channels. When we adapt that last click attribution to CTV, so it's more it's more accurate in a sense, and tries to really understand, did this really drive the install?
You're muted, John.
I knew it would happen once. I'm trying to keep quiet because there's renovations going on in my house. So there we go. There we had my one time. I think that's a good time to bring up our last poll, and that's poll number 4. And that poll is about, hey, would you like to see a short demo of the singular CTV attribution and analytics solution? It's a simple yes or no. If you click yes, you'll probably get an email. If you click no, you probably won't get an email. And if you say yes, you get a chance to take a look at how it works, what it looks like, all that stuff. Excellent. Okay, continuing on measurement. Ashley, what techniques are you using for measurement?
Sure. I mean, first of all, really important for anyone working with an MMP like Singular to use those tools at hand. I think that you all have done a very good job being thoughtful in terms of things like how is TV assisting, how do you change the way the impression is being looked at, because the bigger companies tend to win all of the credit because those are self-attributing, that kind of thing. When we think about measurement at TV Scientific, it's twofold. So we do measure on your CTV buy specifically. So you're using other tools to understand the holistic impact of your marketing mix. But when we think about how we measure, really we're using all of those signals from the impression to the install that we're receiving to count the best at the end of the day. How many installs, how many purchases, how many trials was TV involved with? And by measuring most accurately against the CTV buy, that's how you start to get a signal of where to optimize against. So I really see them as apples to oranges when we talk about measuring just against your CTV buy and then against the larger marketing mix. Tools that we use with customers, Spike Lift is an easy one to show impact really quickly. That's the before and after. You've seen that in linear, in the 15 minutes before an ad was shown against the next hour after an ad was shown. What does that lift look like? That should tell you pretty intuitively if CTV is driving you anything incremental. And it's interesting that can go on for hours, even though typically we look at a shorter attribution window with installs. Lift testing, really common, whether that's against a PSA, which is of course the gold standard for incrementality testing. We also do a lot of geo lift testing with customers. So deciding what some of those geos to test in against control geos, spending in one, not spending in another, and then understanding what the incremental lift is. And then we talked about Halo. We certainly look at Halo with our customers against other channels. That's more so on the just rising of all channels performance against incrementality. So some of the tools we look at from a measurement point.
Excellent. Alexander, anything to add?
Yeah, I guess what we're talking here with measurement is a test really for your BI teams, your data teams on the advertising side. It's the challenge is, of course, you have your MMP data as the basis for what has been the impact of my campaigns, but there is more to look into it. There's how do you put a dollar value on an assisted install? How do you also measure re-engaged users through connected TV ads, because it happens and it's something that also is valuable. So if you look at downstream events, installs that are attributed as CTV, then you add to this a certain value for your assisted installs. On top of it, you also look at the re-engaged users that are coming from your CTV ads. You have different, let's say, filters that are adding value into your real value of CTV. You do your incremental testing for, understanding the incremental reach, really comparing your control and expose, and then assigning like a value to your overall numbers. It takes a lot of efforts on the data side, but I think the savvy marketers that have the data teams, BI teams capabilities, and can look into this in depth will see the real value of CTV, because I think, and we talked about it at the very beginning, that if you want to compare CTV as exactly the same than your display channels, you might be missing a lot into the picture, and having this extra work on the measurement side will give you the true value really of CTV.
I love it. I love it. Giving your BI team a test, hey, and grading them maybe. Who knows? I don't. Avitar, we're going to turn to you. We've heard the word lift. We've heard the term assisted installs. How are you able to measure some of this stuff?
So, from a singular perspective, like we try to make all the data available in its rawest form. You can obviously have it be more aggregated as well, but we provide all the raw data, and what that really enables every advertiser to do is figure out sort of their look at the assist, look at the MTA, really kind of understand, well, how many touch points on average does the user go through before they actually convert, which channels are potentially cannibalizing each other, and maybe like, oh, okay, maybe I don't need to spend here and here. This one's good enough because this channel is actually the one that's driving. So we do see a lot of value in Assist. We see a lot of our customers sort of using it. The challenge with Assist is exactly to sort of mirror what Alexander was saying, is sort of, well, how do I quantify that? I know I had 100, let's say I know a channel drove 100 installs and 50 assists. So what is the CPI for this channel? What is the ROAS for this channel? So the biggest challenge there, kind of going back to the earlier point, is how do you sort of keep it simple? How do you sort of at the end of the day and consistent and enable a UA manager to say, all right, this is my ROAS here, this is my ROAS there. And that's where more sophisticated methodologies come in, whether it's MTA or other or incrementality that we'll get to.
When I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking of the phrase or the saying, all answers are wrong, some are useful. So it can be very, very challenging. Jake, talk about attribution windows. What attribution windows are we talking about? Is it 30 minutes? Is it an hour? Is it a day, a week? What are we talking about?
This is definitely a huge point of contention across the industry, and I think we're still not at steady state. We're in the wild, wild west of performance CTV, and so brands out there that are scaled on this or just getting started, use that and use your BI teams to inform the product as it gets built. So inform your singular rep. Hey, this is how we're thinking about this, whether it is a part of their product or isn't a part of their product. That will be helpful for them to understand. But what we've seen sort of settle in as industry standard is a 24 attribution window, but up to 7 days. I think there's evidence that maybe up to 7 days, and 30 seems like a stretch, but hey, if you guys want to give us 30-day windows, we'll take it. And then within that 24-hour to 48-hour attribution window, there are times where a CTV impression might even supersede a click somewhere else, right? Where if I saw a TV ad for an hour or two afterwards, maybe the TV ad is actually what drove the install. And so some of our advertisers are now treating those first few hours as superseding a click. So it's no longer an assisted install, but it's an actual driven install. So there's a lot to be figured out over the course of the next few years as this industry starts to mature, and it's been around for a cup of coffee now. But that's what we've seen as kind of some of the I'd say, best practices in the attribution space.
Excellent. Okay. Last question before we go to key takeaways from panelists and then questions. Evitar, we're going to give it to you. We've heard the word incrementality. We've heard, I think we've heard media mix marketing. Talk about those methodologies when you're looking at CTV impact.
Sure. So I think the nice thing about sort of these incrementality methodologies, so whether MMM or other ones, is that they are very good at being consistent. So they can take different marketing channels that have different dynamics, and some are upper funnel and lower funnel, and some are on the same device or not on the same device, and exactly sort of the challenges that you see in CTV. So these incrementality methods, they can take all your different marketing channels, and they can very much sort of standardize the measurement. They can say, we're going to use the same ruler and the same measurement methodology, essentially, to look at all your marketing channels. And that's very appealing. A, for consistency, and B, also for accuracy, because these methodologies like MMM do take into account cannibalization, they do take into account organic uplift, and all these different dynamics that are definitely happening. So we at Singular, we're big believers in this direction of incrementality and triple M. That being said, it has significant challenges. And this isn't a triple M webinar, but it's definitely something that we've seen customers use successfully, but it is not simple to get it to work successfully. You have to invest a lot in there. But looking into the future and where the industry is going, I do think those types of methodologies of incrementality and triple M are going to become more and more prevalent because they offer such a great sort of value proposition. In standardizing the measurement and in being more accurately capturing all the different dynamics that are happening.
Excellent. And Singular has an MMM solution, so I like your balanced approach to that. I also like that very much. I mean, it looks at all the outputs and it looks at all the inputs, and as you shift, it gets more and more accurate over time. Excellent. Let's go to key takeaways. Alex, we're going to start with you. Briefly, is there one thing that you'd like the attendees to remember from today?
I'll be briefer than all these bullet points. We talked about it. Incremental reach. It's important to look into the power of CTV in terms of scale. You have a lot of new streaming platforms, existing streaming platforms that are making their inventory available. It's really interesting to see the targeting options, optimization capabilities that those platforms can give you. It's much better than TV advertising has ever given. Creative, we talked about it a lot. It doesn't need to be that expensive or high production. Really just important with best practices to have direct response elements, don't neglect the audio, and really test what would work for you, live action, UGC, or gameplay. We don't run less than 4 to 6 creatives to start with any campaign. And the last point is about when choosing the platform, really look into what are the capabilities in terms of inventory, reach, scale. Do they give you the flexibility to test different creatives, attribution windows, targeting options, and also, expertise is quite important, as we know it's an early stage industry, it's an early stage technology, so we need to also have expertise and people who give us the right advice in this space.
Gotcha. Excellent. Jake, you're up. Your top takeaway. If you can keep it to 30 seconds, I will give you $1 million.
I'll try and keep it to 10. In its simplest terms, we talked about this a bunch, the cake and eat it too problem. If you're getting into this channel and you're just getting started and you are willing to treat it like both a brand and a performance channel, then great, let's talk about what places you want to run. If you want to treat it as a pure performance channel, then don't ask to run on the most expensive inventory. It's sort of this fine dance that we've got to play, but I think there's a lot of opportunity in the CTV space, and look forward to the next few years of this industry growing.
Wonderful. You're a rock star. The $1 million is fake money. Ashley, 30 seconds.
My top takeaway is, we talked about it quite a bit. Don't assume CTV will work exactly the way it has your other, your traditional UA channels work. Test and learn. Be open about your goals and really find a partner that you can strategize with and that partners with you, isn't just delivering the cheapest CPI.
Excellent. Eviatar, you're up. 30 seconds.
Yep. So number one, we see more and more advertisers in all verticals, not only gaming, diversifying their marketing efforts, and CTV is a huge part of that. So it's a big trend. We see it happen. Two, it is already today possible to have good measurements for CTV marketing. And again, that's sort of how we look at CTV within last click attribution waterfall. And finally, incrementality methods will enhance the ability to measure all marketing activities using the same measurement stick. So that's sort of where we're going, and that's an exciting future as well. That's it.
You are also a rock star. Thank you all. Awesome. Time for the questions here. We have one from Pete Conway. I'm going to throw it to Jake. He says he's a home improvement company. CTV want to target homeowners who are 35 to 64 years old, have a household income of 125,000 plus. Will that work? Is that doable?
Yes, I think that's definitely doable, and I can't believe that this question came up after we were talking about home improvement before the webinar started. But yes, you can if you come in with that frame. Yeah, exactly right. So yes, you can definitely do all of that. But I think to Ashley's point, keep an open mind about where your customer actually lives. So test with that framework, and then if the traction starts to move in a different direction, then expand to that spot, sort of land and expand. But yes, you can do that, and just make sure that you frame what your KPI that you're trying to drive is. If it's just reaching those people, that's more of a brand play. If it's driving them to a website visit or whatever it happens to be, then that's more of a performance play.
Yeah, excellent. Next one is for Ashley. It's from Stuart. Recommendation for number of streaming services to use for any given campaign. Local campaigns, not national. Best to use one or pair it with multiple. Your answer, Ashley, briefly.
Yeah, I would, for if you're hyper targeted on a local level, find a platform where you can run across all inventory, because you may not be able to get the number of impressions that you are targeting. So when I think about local, I'm really thinking about run of all streaming services, because ideally that's where your audience will be. So think less about how many services and more about how do you get reach at that local level.
Love it, love it, love it. Next one is for Alexander. It's from Ritesh. Organization that works primarily on mobile user acquisition, just starting on CTV advertising. I bet a lot of people are on this boat. How would you suggest to strategize on budget to get maximum ROI? So what budget do you need to start playing with here, Alexander?
Yeah, sure. So there is a learning period on CTV, just like you have it on programmatic buying. So it's important to set expectations right. You won't have results after 5K spent. So in terms of budget, I think we usually recommend to have maybe like a 30K budget in mind, where you can test several audiences over a month. That's like at least giving some insights into what works, what's the direction you can go. But it's not going to be the ultimate result of the campaign. It can be that 30K you have early results, and you'll need to investigate more. It could be that you have early results and you can dig deeper, but it's at least a ballpark that gives you an idea of what works.
Excellent. We have a comment, smart comment from a guest who says, we've been using CTV for a year now. Our most important play has been remarketing campaigns where we're hitting 5x returns. We've heard the word remarketing or retargeting or re-engagement a few times this past hour. Super, super smart. If you already have an installed base and you want to hit them again, it's really hard on iOS and it can be challenging and expensive on Android as well. This is an opportunity. Okay, last question, and we'll head this one off to Jake. And it's QR codes. Is there value, or is this hype? Should I use one? This is from anonymous attendee.
Oh, great. Yes, so there is value to QR codes, but not in the way that you think. I think people think of QR codes as sort of simulating a click, but the click-through rate on CTV is below 1%. It's really, really, really low. It's lower than on mobile. So don't think of it as a click, but what we have seen is that if you run a QR code on your ad versus you don't run a QR code on your ad, we've seen an uplift just because I think users tend to engage. They grab their phone. They might not scan the code, but they still run a search of some sort. So there's these non-obvious sort of behavior components to these ads. Yes, QR codes are valuable. No, don't think of them as simulating a click and making CTV work just like your mobile campaign, but there's a ton of value.
Love it. It's psychological. Hey, awesome. Absolutely great. You know what? This has been so much fun. It's gone way too fast. I wish we had another 20 minutes here. We have other great questions. We'll try and answer those on the Singular blog. We also have great takeaways that I forced our panelists to rush through, and we'll share them on social later on. So follow Singular on LinkedIn if you like. Alexander, thank you so much. You rocked it. Jake, super insightful. Thank you so much for spending this hour with us. Ashley, really appreciate all your insights and wisdom and knowledge. Evitar, great answers as usual. Thank you all, and thank you for those who, hey, you spent this hour with us. We appreciate you. Have a great day. See you soon.
Thank you so much.